está aí com Esquerda Online. Nós estamos aqui diretamente do NIEP Marx, né, um seminário que começou ontem, maravilhoso, e hoje a gente está com um mini curso com a Cinzia Arruzza e a Tithi Bhattacharya. A gente queria aproveitar para trazer duas autoras, né, do livro Feminismo para os 99%, para fazer uma palavra aqui para a gente. A mulherada está acompanhando todo o debate internacional sobre a greve internacional de mulheres, e queria também dizer que junto com a gente está aqui, né, a Raíza Ruas, que está ajudando a gente, vai ajudar aqui na tradução, e a Martina Gomes, que está prefaciando um livro que acabou de sair, que é o Ligações Perigosas, que é um livro da Cinzia Arruzza, que a editora Usina está lançando aqui no NIEP. Bem, a gente queria saudar a presença de vocês e começar pegando um pouquinho do debate sobre o feminismo para os 99%, a greve internacional de mulheres. Então queríamos começar pela Tithi, sobre a teoria da reprodução social. Hoje as mulheres no Brasil e no mundo continuam lutando, se erguendo contra Trump, Bolsonaro, contra a extrema direita. Então, nesse sentido, a importância da teoria da reprodução social para a luta de classes, para o movimento de mulheres e para a construção da greve internacional de mulheres.
But does this mean that working class struggle goes away? No. We have to look at the other prong of attack of neoliberalism, which was attack on living conditions of the working class in order to restore its profit rates. So first it broke unions and union powers in the workplace, then it attacked social welfare benefits of the worker, which were the living conditions of the worker. So in the global north, it translated as privatizing previously public services such as healthcare, education, and so on. Even public parks were privatized. In the global south, it translated as the IMF and the World Bank imposing these draconian measures on the economies of the global south, which forced these economies to cut their social spending, withdraw subsidies for food, fuel, all the resources that the working class needs to socially reproduce itself. Okay? So this was a dual level attack on working class lives, both in the workplace and in the sphere of social reproduction. The outcome, the fallout of it, was that the main organs of fight back of the working class was broken by neoliberalism. So union power was broken, left organizations were attacked. That is why, however, two things could have happened. One, working class does not fight back, but that never happens. So then the second thing happened is struggle moved into the sphere of social reproduction. So what we see from the 1990s onwards is anti-austerity battles in community spaces, not necessarily in workplace spaces, to defend the right of the working class to live. So we see struggles against water privatization, like in Cochabamba, Bolivia, and in Ireland. We see struggles to protect public health by nurses all over the world. And recently we see the strikes by teachers, again, a global phenomenon of teacher strikes. So these are all struggles to defend the social reproduction of the working class, and what I have called insurgent care. These are struggles to restore care insurgently in working class communities. And of this, is it any surprise that women are on the leading edge of these struggles, because it is women in these communities who've had to provide care for their families and the communities as a whole. So what we are seeing is insurgent care strikes across the globe to restore dignity and living conditions to working class communities and lives. The most militant expression of this is the feminist strike, because the feminist strike is the most conscious and coherent expression of this demand to restore dignity to living conditions. It is exceptional and unique in three ways. One, it is international in scope. It defies capitalists' efforts to contain struggles within borders. The strike defies borders and tries to establish international solidarity with their absolutely brilliant phrase, solidarity is our weapon. This connects the struggles of migrant workers in the global north caring for white women's children with the teachers in the global north who are trying to defend public education, especially in black and brown neighborhoods, alongside of the question of border justice by abolishing borders. So the feminist strike slogan connects these struggles in integrated ways. Second, the feminist strike questions the division between workplace and non-workplace struggle. It says women's labor is the presupposition to all work. Unless women work, then no commodities can get produced because no workers can be ready to come to work. The work that is performed in the home is thus a vital presupposition to the production of commodities that uphold capitalism. And if women strike, then work in both spheres will come to a standstill. So one of the other slogans of the feminist strike has been, when we stop work, the world stops. The third important thing about the feminist strike is it connects in extremely creative and insurgent ways the demand for a planet that is livable for all of us. And in this, I think it is a precursor to the children's strike that is happening in the globes. Because if you see, the women's strike set a model, if you like, for a non-workplace based generalized social strike, which is then reciprocated and replicated in the children's strike as well. Women are the first victims of climate change and the climate collapse, okay? So most, 80% of climate refugees are women. So again, is it any wonder that justice for our planet is one of the key platforms of the feminist strike? And again, here internationalism established the need for the fight for a better planet for all of us. For us all, cannot be contained within a border, but must be aimed at the predatory nature of the system as a whole. So this is how I think the feminist strike and the feminism for the 99% is an extraordinary movement that actually expresses the key tenets of social reproduction theory. But what it also does, it informs and enriches this theory so that as social reproduction theorists and activists, we learn from the streets and then we join the streets in the struggle.
Passar diretamente então para perguntar para a Cinzia, agradecer a disposição das duas em estar aqui nesse intervalo discutindo com a gente. E aí falar da importância do livro, né, Ligações Perigosas, Casamentos e Divórcios entre o Marxismo e o Feminismo. E dizer que aqui o prefácio, né, são de 3 mulheres negras, porque pensar o casamento e o divórcio entre o marxismo e o feminismo aqui necessariamente é incluir a questão racial. Então a Cinzia fala no livro que, além da análise das separações e dos casamentos, tem uma posição política, né? Que é essa teoria, a discussão que está colocada aqui, servir para ser um instrumento de organização e de luta. Então, assim, no livro você fala entre os casamentos e os divórcios, entre o marxismo e o feminismo. Hoje a gente enfrenta em vários países, né, governos neofascistas, em especial no Brasil, o governo Bolsonaro. Qual é para ti a tarefa dos socialistas, das organizações, né, daqueles que lutam para fazer esse casamento acontecer entre o marxismo, o feminismo e também as outras questões aí da classe trabalhadora, né, como a questão racial?
Okay, so first of all, when I wrote the book, which was almost 10 years ago, the idea was to offer like a tool, accessible tool to activists, precisely for, with the idea of overcoming a certain way of thinking about the relationship between class struggle and the socialist movement and feminism. So I wanted to also respond to feminist criticisms of the work of the whole history of the workers' movement as basically been somehow alien to the feminist movement or to women's struggle. So this is the reason why I talked about marriages and divorces, because my idea was that the history is much more complicated and messy than this. That the theory, the narrative according to which the workers' movement has historically always neglected the women's question or gender issues or gender oppression, and finally the feminists had to break with the workers' movement in order to advance a feminist perspective. This kind of narrative is actually historically ungrounded. In what sense? In the sense that if we look at the history of the relationship between the workers' movement and women's struggle, what we can see first of all is that the mass mobilization by the workers' movement opened a democratic space for women's struggles to take place within. Not only this, working class organizations were also among the first to campaign for women's rights. I mean, we can discuss about the limits of how this was framed and so on, but it is a matter of fact that it was German social democracy, for example, in Germany, to campaign for the first time for women's right to vote. It was not the feminist movement, the liberal feminist movement, that was not campaigning for the right to vote. And it is a matter of fact that the Russian Revolution was the first instance in which a country legalized abortion. Not only legalized abortion, but the idea was to have free abortion, so that the public hospitals would offer free abortion to women. And the 1918 Family Code, for example, was by far the most progressive reform of family law, in the sense of granting rights not only to women but also to children and breaking the patriarchal family. We could multiply the examples, but clearly it is really not true that somehow the whole history of the socialist or revolutionary movement, working class movement, is a history of in which women didn't have a say, or women's questions were not addressed, and so on. Of course, there are also divorces. So, in other words, there is, the workers' movement was also a product of its own time, which means that, both theoretical fallacies and flaws, but also the internalization of prejudice and stereotypes did play a role also within the organizations of the workers' movement and the socialist movement. So we had cases of reductionism, and also rape and sexual abuse within the organization, sexual hierarchy within the organizations, and so on. So when we look at the history, this is not really a scholarly work, it's more of an introduction, but whether, when we try to get an overview of this story, we need to, accept the complexity of it, and accept the fact that it was, both marriages and divorces, but at the same time, what appears as evident is that the moments in which women and LGBT people managed to win the most were the moment in which there was a powerful working class movement that opened the space, the political space, and the democratic space for other also struggles to take place. Go back to the present and Bolsonaro and so on. Now, one of the risks, and I'm going to talk about this tomorrow, but one of the risks today in front of this rise of the right, of the far right, and attack everywhere, not just in Brazil, but all of these right-wing forces are basically attacking, first of all, women's freedoms, LGBT people, and migrants and racialized people. This is basically what they all have in common, from India to Brazil, to Trump in United States, to the thank God former government in Italy and Salvini, Orban, and so on, in Hungary and so on. So they all have in common this frontal attack on women's rights and freedoms and LGBT people. Now, one of the risks is that you may have a response from the left, and this is actually taking place, for example, in Europe, a response on the left that says these attacks are also motivated, and the rise of the right are also motivated by the excesses of anti-oppression politics, the excesses of feminism, the excesses of LGBT politics, and so on, and also the excessive availability to open borders and to defend open borders and so on. So in order to basically win back the working class from these right-wing forces, we do need to somehow drop a number of demands and discourses and analysis that have to do with sexual liberation, gender liberation. And some political actors in Europe, for example, but also in the United States, are going so far as to say we also have to drop the demand for open borders, and we actually should endorse protectionist policies in terms of, not only in economic terms, but also in terms of protecting the national working class, buying into the idea that immigration is pushing down wages, which is a fantasy. This is not actually the case. So this is a huge risk, and I think the outcome of this kind of response to the rise of the far right is basically the political suicide of the left. If we do this, if we go down this path, basically we have already lost the battle. So from this viewpoint, and I hope the book will be helpful, a tiny little contribution to this political battle. From this viewpoint, I think the proper response is actually to rearticulate a political project that centers the working class, but centers the working class in its complexities, which means racialization, gender, sexual orientation, and so on, and that overcome the opposition, the stubborn opposition between so-called identity politics and class politics, and rather articulate revolutionary class politics that is already from the start anti-racist, feminist, anti-imperialist, and for sexual liberation. I think this is the only way to go if we want to really beat the right. And from this viewpoint, I think we may actually learn from the feminist movement around the world, because this is exactly what the feminist strikes are doing. And they are also demonstrating that you can articulate an anti-austerity, anti-neoliberal politics focusing on, for example, from issues from wages to public spending, healthcare, and education, and so on, while at the same time pushing forward a radical feminist agenda and a radical anti-racist agenda, and doing this by having a mass appeal. So this is what the movement is demonstrating, that you can articulate this kind of politics and bring millions of people to the streets and organize strikes in the workplace with millions of people. Look at Spain with 5 million last year, 6 million this year. So I think this is also here in Brazil, to beat Bolsonaro. I think what we should try to do, you more, but if we can help, give you our tiny little contributions, is precisely what the feminist movement has been doing in Argentina, in Spain, in Poland, in Italy, and so on.